welcome back, everyone, to the LJLOU for our fifth game of the night, which should be quite an exciting one. Is still joined by myself and Nymera after what was an interesting match, and now we're going to dive right into another. I think this match arguably is more interesting because, as I said before we went to break, this game will tell us if the Hawks are able to play with the big kids at the play park.
Absolutely, and we've talked a lot on podcasts, on previous casts as well, and of course throughout the games today about this envelope of playoff teams. And now, of course, we've seen Sengoku go 2-0. That's a little bit of a spark in there. We're thinking, oh, maybe it's not quite as safe as we'd penned it to be, but the Hawks are looking to scrape anything from this week right now. Scrape something. If they get one win out of their games today, they're feeling very good about things because that means that they will have taken a game off of one of those teams in that envelope bracket. They start pulling themselves up onto at least another team's level, and if another one of them loses, which of course will be the case, because there are some games across that bracket too, they can put themselves firmly in contention for higher playoff spots, which is something that the Hawks have never been afforded before.
Yeah, and personally, I think that's a great sign for this new team. Like, okay, new team is probably an unfair thing to call them.
New roster.
A new roster, yeah, it's a better way to word it there, because this is a roster that has felt a little bit out of balance recently, and now coming into this one, I think the biggest impression to me isn't Corporal in the bottom lane, but it's Dasher in the mid. I think Dasher has been playing phenomenally recently, and I'm really excited to see what used to be a inconsistent player come out, do well in lane, and carry that lead to the rest of his team.
That's a very good point, because even before Dasher was on this team as well, before the 2020 era, because of course he started as a top lane in spring 2020. Then he moved back into mid lane once Ramune was not really clicking with the team, and Dasher wanted to kind of have I presume wanted to have a bit more of a pivotal role in that team as well. But before then he was on USG, he was on some of the better performing teams of this region too. He's always been up there in contention to be a top mid laner in the region, and one of the people that can occasionally take it to Arya or to Saros if they were playing, or to these other big names. And right now, he is like the Obi-Wan Kenobi, you are my only hope kind of archetype for this team right now. That's the mantle which we put him on.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see what are they going to give him in the middle lane, right? Because I don't want to see him on the retreat Orianna, as I will sometimes call it. You can do well in the lane, but like you're just sort of there. I'd love to see something aggressive. I don't really know if Lucian is as prevalent as it used to be. But
it used to be banned against him permanently, actually. It was one of our running jokes in spring 2020. Lucian was only banned against one team, so it was banned all the time. And it was just Asher as well.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out. Does that trend continue? A few patches down the track, as we will be getting into Champion Select between our two teams, of course, the Rascal Jesters and, I nearly said DFM, the Hawks coming through. And so far, across the list when it comes to bans, nothing comes across as really surprising. Aurelia is really strong, LeBlanc is very popular. There's the Lucian that we were just talking about as well.
And again, back in his time as a top laner, Dasher was an Aurelia player even out of meta at that point. 3 bans towards Dasher. We saw it earlier in the day against Arya. Actually, these were the same bans that were thrown against Arya in the mid lane. Dasher putting a real amount of fear into Rascal Jester's hearts at that point. On the other side, a couple more tier listy bans. The Ziggs, the Gwen, and the Karm, all flexible, all powerful. So is the Viego, though, and that's got through.
Yeah, and happily grab that one for the side of Rascal Jesters, and I saw a Rumble, and oh my lord, I have not seen a Rumble jungle in so long, but is this for Tussle?
That's a very good question, because I look at that and I say, this isn't patch 11.11, this isn't patch 11.12, that's a little bit out of depth right now. But when you lock in something like the Viego and he starts diving into the fights, well, maybe you can put down an equalizer and feel a bit happier about it. But this is very early into the draft. I don't think Rumble lanes very well into a lot of champions right now. You can do well against stuff like Malphite, right? But I don't think stuff like Viego is something you want to be fighting early in lane against. At least the Varus does help, because Varus Rumble as a combo is something which is very strong. You root someone onto the ultimate, they take all of the damage, and they tend to die after that point just because the base damage is so damn high. Again, it's just a little too face up in the draft for me right now.
Yeah, it just feels very out of place for a person who we know them playing a lot of the Volibear. When I think of Tussle, I think of Volibear. Right? That's been the go-to for this guy.
Recently,
yeah, to see it just bust out the Rumble seemingly out of nowhere, because again, Volibear, what I consider a signature, is still up and available. So I suppose we'll have to see. This could be something wacky. Like, you never know. Like, it could be, I don't know, Dasher in the middle lane rocking the rumble. I don't know, man. Something weird could come out from this game as we're hitting the second round of bans, and Hawks took their time to finally remove their inactive.
Okay, so that is, of course, one of Kanatu's strongest champions alongside the Camille. I would imagine the Camille is going to be banned as well if they're going towards that top side. Just stops Rascal Jester being able to leave the... Well, of course, the Viego can go top lane as well, so maybe that's less valuable. Maybe they want to force Viego top lane and say, look, we're not letting you play around hyper top lane-centric draft with a safe bot lane, because Jin Leona is a very hard duo to unseat from bot lane. That means you're assuming you're going towards playing towards top side on the same kind of ticket. So remove some of the champions which benefit the most from that. That seems to be the play of the game right now from the Hawks.
Yeah, coming through here. Let's see what the second ban is going to be. Is it going to be, as you talked about, that Camille? No, yes, it is. He called it right there. Making sure Kanatu's lane isn't as nice as it possibly could be. And poor little... I feel a little bit bad for Upperman there. I mean, pretty good for Upperman, sorry. Because now we've got the Gnar. Either I hate the Gnar, stop playing Gnar, and there isn't a whole lot that's meta. Sorry, I just don't like the Gnar. I'm so overseeing this champion.
No, I think so. Like, last split, I completely agreed with you. And then we saw Ebby stomp some kids at MSI. I'm like, all right, okay, fine, you can play Gnar. You've convinced me. It's just an LJL champion. It's just something we play. Same with the LeBlanc. That's been banned a lot throughout this series too. Well, not series, this game day. And what the Hawks have decided is that if you're not going to play around bot side, we're not going to play around bot side. Either strong defensive peel back support of the Braum for Corporal. It's not a playmaker, but then again, you can't realistically play something like a Rakan into the Leona, which has been one of Corporal's big picks. Ooh. Sejuani locked up. This means that Viego is going into a lane somewhere, and he is so good at proccing the Sejuani E passive, because everything is melee and it has a double hit. And the Yone locked in. One of these lanes is going to be blind. Both of them are okay into the Gnar, though. I'm sure they'll flex it around based on what's going to be put back into that mid lane. Double melee lanes with a melee support for the Sejuani. Set up galore for Hachimecha.
And Rascal Jester, as they were posturing for a fight before, well, now they're begging for one. With the amount of engage and dive that they've got, I love what they're bringing to the table. But the Hawks... look like they're confident. They say, okay, we'll take the Braum for some defensibility and the Lee Sin to try and go toe-to-toe with one of the solo lanes.
So, I would assume this is going to be Viego top lane, Yone into the mid. Just because Yone prefers using that E in the mid lane, because it does mean that you can cross most of the entirety of that lane with the E and ping back. And the top lane sometimes that can be a bit of an issue. As one of our other casters in our crew, Melvin Isle, has pointed out in chat, of course, Sejuani top was an option, has been played a little bit. From what I've talked to of people who do play Sejuani top, though, when being asked, is it actually good? When is it good? Well, actually, it's never really good. It's just something you do to kind of pull off some weird stuff in draft, which potentially it could have been at this point. Having the double melee setup lanes and the Leona for setup in bot lane, I think it is the more valuable point to position, rather, to put it into the jungle role, though. Hachimecha has ample opportunity to keep things on the front foot, though, as this pick.
I'm really not 9 times out of 10 when I see Yone in the middle lane and something like a Viego, in this case the Viego top lane. I always worry, and something I mentioned last game, I mentioned it before, is lack of range, lack of wave clear. But then you look at what the rest of the team is bringing, you're like, well, I mean, you don't have to worry about wave clear if you tower dive them and they die. So it works out quite nicely.
I've been doing that in Pokemon Unite. It's exactly the same thing. You just bust open the tower.
Exactly. Like, you don't have
I'm sorry.
to
I wish I could have prepped more for League of Legends, but I made a bit of a mistake and put like 200 games into it. But yes, that's just what happens.
I do quite like the dive style, but you have to remember the problem with the dive style is if you miss execute, if you just make a colossal error, then with a lack of range, with a lack of really anything to go with, you're kind of just screwed.
Ooh, I've been consumed, and I've been consumed. You see, you've left your words in the last game. I've left my very soul and my being in there too. As you can see, this fractured echo of myself left on screen. We're just getting through a pause in the game right now. We will be into game sooner rather than later, and yeah, very interested to see what Rascal. Because of course, one of the things about Super Week is that we have had that break, right? We've had that break to say, okay, you have time to now prepare for the new patch. Rascal Jesters obviously have an idea of how they want to play it, yet to be seen whether it is good or whether they can play around Sejani's weaker early game, playing around a very low range composition, which if shut down is going to do not the best damage. I'm interested now to see how confident they are bringing it up against another playoff contending team in the Hawks this time around.
Yeah, but in the likes of the Hawks, you're not going to look at the Hawks right now and consider them a direct comparison to some of the other stronger teams in the LJL's top half bracket. I look at something like maybe Axis or V3 of a bit more concern than I would with Hawks, purely because the Hawks, while they've looked good, they haven't looked like a team that is going to threaten the top tier contenders, right? Like, it's not up there yet. So
no, not quite. And that is the worry. And, much like Axis, one of my continual worries with them is, can they put together a consistent string of form enough to actually make a dent in the split? Because every time they have put a amount of games in, like a 6-game win streak or something like a miracle run into playoffs, but they've never managed to actually make it last. And that's what I'm really looking for from that team. Hawks, bit more consistent, but they've kind of flip-flopped a little bit more on that sense. They need to try and really stick the landing on the second half of the split.
Well, let's find out as we will be diving right into our game here between Rascal Jesters and the Hawks. See how will this game get itself going? Hopefully we'll get some early aggression coming out, and things kick off with, well, Dasher just being super annoying. It's super aggressive.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember the other Lee Sin games that Dash has had this split. Seem to remember him being pretty. Oh, what?
I'm so unfortunate. I'm having some aggressive frame drops, so I didn't see a damn thing.
I'll tell you what also dropped. Recap in the mid lane, just lands the Q, gets the level 2, and Recap just dies on the Ionis. That's first blood, over to Lee Sin. Dasher, we talked him up, and he's brought his A game.
No, it's a good start. And yeah, we talked about the importance of Dasher being able to do well. Okay, so is it just a straight up just Recap not respecting Dasher? Is that what happens?
So this is base damage of Lee Sin. Gets both passive autos through with the increased attack speed. Still has the Conqueror on at this point. Actually falls off at that, but I mean, at the end of the day, your Q does a lot more damage. The lower HP they are goes up to double damage at that kind of HP. Base damages, rule supreme. Dasher gets the kill.
Brilliant stuff. We talked about. We were just talking about how important it is that Dasher does well in this middle lane. How we want the Hawks to snowball out, and I mean, this is a brilliant showing coming in here from the mid lane of the Hawks, and I really hope that as a sign of things to come for the team, like Tussle comes in and reganks the middle lane level aggression.
And at the end of the day, we've never complained about the Hawks laning phase. We know that they are strong individual players in the early game. It's just been some directionless play in the mid and late game, which we've ended up criticizing. After the first week, the Hawks could very well have been 2-0, and they did lose some late game affairs. Kind of felt a bit sorry for them. They're sat now at 4-4, which is enough for now, but they have been left ruining a couple of their opportunities. It's now still in their own hands, at least, to determine their own plus face, and Dasher is just putting down pressure across the board.
I mean, that's what you got to do, right? You pick the Lee Sin in general just for early game aggression. When you see at least in jungle, you expect a lot of aggressive plays, a lot of something to come out of it. I don't see why that changes for mid lane. Be up in the enemy jungler's face, make their life hell.
Heck yeah, absolutely. Slowly focusing in towards the top lane as well. Afamen's Gnar coming out again. Have to say, Afamen's Gnar is a champion which I've often had some issues with, even in his peak form, particularly in spring 2020 when Afamen was such a force. Going into 2020 summer as well. Afamen was better as an Aatrox player for me than he was. Oh my gosh, Dasher. Wait, he's just going to jump straight back.
Yeah,
you tried that. You okay, that recap?
What is going on? I don't think Recap respects the Lee Sin mid based on what I'm seeing.
No, I mean, he walked up, ate all of this ridiculous base damage that Lee Sin has in the early game, particularly having the Conqueror as well, being able to stack it up for those continuing autos. Yone can't take the extended trades. Very good against your mages, because you can start closing the distance, but closing the distance against Lee Sin, that's exactly where he wants to be. He has more damage than you, and he makes your life very difficult after that point. Secret tried to get some vision into the enemy jungle. Tussle running at him. Luckily, Hachimecha is there to secure.
Yeah, Hachimecha there means Tussle's looking for more there. Secret will get out without too many troubles. Burning the flash is a bit annoying, but good work from Tussle, I suppose, seeing an opening, because you talked about the Sejuani's weaker early game, and Tussle decides, well, if the Sejuani can't go toe-for-toe against me and my blasting wand, then why am I going to respect it?
Absolutely, and Rumble has fallen off a lot. You're not the fastest jungling, clear jungler in the game right now, and you do have a couple more issues, particularly actually coming in later and later. I mean, they've had bug fixes onto Rumble to stop him being able to overheat from his W level 1, I believe. I believe that's one of the biggest changes to him, as long as I read that right. But Tussle managed to get through the first clear, even with the Sejuani right now. But if you're looking to scale up into team fights as the Rumble, well, that's exactly what Sejuani is going to do as well. At least you got the Lee Sin buying you some pressure, stopping Rascal Jester kind of taking control of the map as they want. But it hasn't led to a lead right now where, like, the Sejuani has missed out on camps and missed out on XP.
Yeah, and I think that's the hallmark of a Sejuani, right? Even if they don't get the plays they're looking for, Sejuani is still a bloody annoying tank that never dies and does half your health as an AD carry, because, of course, why wouldn't it? So
of course not.
That hasn't changed. That hasn't changed through all the nerfs that she's received, where, you know, she verged on that level of, you know, you could be the best out of the best, but you can't be there just yet. So it's still Sejuani at the end of the day. And with the comp that's drafted with it, all the melee.
It is, because, and the best thing is, it's not even just Sejuani that's engaging. You have Leonis to do that. You've got Jhin W. You have Yone ultimate. Ample amounts of CC and engage that can also go straight through the Braum Shield. You know, Braum Shield, for all its positive points, doesn't stop a Yone flying in. It doesn't stop a solar flare. It will help with the Sejuani, yes, but I look at this Hawks comp and I'm like, how in the hell are you going to keep this Varus safe? It's going to be an uphill battle if they aren't approaching fights the right way.
I think you could maybe, and this is a big maybe, get away with some laziness because you have a Braum, right? Braum is amazing defensively when used properly, so you could maybe get away with something. But 9 times out of 10, it's going to be if, you know, Zenit doesn't have flash, Zenit doesn't have cleanser, Zenit doesn't dodge that skill shot, you're dead, as we're seeing. Can't dodge an equalizer. Yeah, running for it there. Soul gets down low, but not going to get down. Hachimecha coming in with 6.
The Captain Jack.
Good TP coming through on the backside as well. The fight is dragging out as frames are not having it here. It looks like the Hawks are running for it. I can't tell.
They're running for it, but they can't find an exit. The TP from Kanatu comes in. Viego steals some corpses, steals some kills. The Hawks go far too aggressive on the bot side, trying to use the equalizer. Just get run down.
Yeah, I like this setup initially, but the TP play from Kanatu was more than enough to sort of dissuade them. And Apperman's strong, but Viego's just stronger.
Especially at this point, particularly because you have so much execute damage with your ultimate too. I mean, we can go into this replay now and you can see that, okay, trying to set up with the Braum. Not a level 6 Braum though. You don't have that ultimate to keep them pinned in place. You do have your passive, it just doesn't get stacked up quick enough. So you don't have everything to make the most use out of course, the equalizer. At least Tussle thought he could get out. Flashes away though, doesn't end up escaping. Sadly, it's a big overcommittal from the Hawks. And as much as, again, we've said that their early game is fine, their laning is fine at least, it's just a little bit of, again, sniffing that directionless, the overstepping, not necessarily understanding what's a good play and what's not a good play, and putting themselves into a deficit.
Yeah, a bit rough for a start here, and now we are seeing posturing coming through Corporal and Tussle, setting up for a topside play. Probably going to be, you know, looking around to secure the Return. Surprise, surprise, that happens every time we look at the LJL, but now we're seeing some topside skirmishing. Apperman just getting caught out by Secret. There is no escape.
No, there is not. Already used the ultimate. There is a convergence of Hawks towards the top side. Birds of Prey diving for the kill.
Yeah, but they haven't got many cooldowns. Their Equalizer not really landing him any, and the flank TP is a disaster. If Hawks don't win this now, the fight is going to go against a recap dive. And goodbye! They were not able to win the fight in time, and the Rascal Jesters clean house with the Hawks.
So close to an awesome turnaround fight, particularly from Dasher on the Lee Sin, or a little bit from Mega Man on the Axis games that we covered earlier in the day. But they can't finish those plays. They can't finish the fight. And as you rightly said, the timer was put so viciously on top of that fight by Recap's teleport. One teleport goes bot from the Viego, another one goes top from the Yone. In this fight, it stops the Appleman getting caught, but the story of this is how the Hawks still feel like they can take the fight. They don't have an AD carry though, they don't have the numbers advantage after the plays come in. They see the ward there, they see the pink ward, even if it's not the vision ward. They understand this is a possibility, and though the equalizer gives them some promise of extra damage, it doesn't actually keep them pinned on there for that long enough. And they don't have the continued damage to keep Rascal Jesters down in a low enough HP state, and they get ran down.
Yeah, and the heartbreaking part, if nothing else, is by the time that flank TP from Recap was there, Hawks couldn't do anything. You're not in a position to retreat at that point if you're the Hawks, so you have no choice but to commit to a fight that you know you probably can't win, but what are your options? Either you run away from the fight and lose everything, or you commit to the fight and maybe get something back. It's a lose-lose situation no matter what you do.
I think as soon as you see the ward in the tri-brush, or if you knew it was there before, you just don't commit. You can't. You just cannot at that point. Maybe you could say, oh, with a better equalizer, with a Lee Sin kick ping them in place, maybe it becomes an even fight at that point. I think with the Yone teleporting in, it's still a lost fight either way. Recap has double buffs now, by the way, so now they've managed to climb themselves out of their own proverbial ditch, as we were talking about with Sengoku and Burning Core earlier on our stream. But yeah, Recap, now in a position where you can be the monstrous initiation carry of the Yone, and I think that should really worry the Hawks, because Dasher put in a lot of work to keep down that Samurai in the mid lane, and it's now just been returned in kind.
And the bigger problem for that is it's not just the middle lane for the Hawks that is potentially out of control with Recap. Look at the top lane. I see a fully completed Mythic already.
Gosh.
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it?
Oops. That's the point where, like, you see the teleport come in, it's just like the record scratch. So you're wondering how I got here. And let me tell you, that story is not one that ends well. Less of a sitcom, more of a horror story.
It really
and Appleman is now sat here. Appleman is going to lose the sidelines heavily now. And one of the things about Nah in previous metas has been, at least you win the sidelines. I've been Dasher doing a good job of trading back here, but yeah, I mean, Appleman in that 1v1 is probably just going to be very ineffective at this point.
It's just because the Nah, while it's stable, Nah doesn't do well when behind, especially against the likes of Viego. 3-0-3, 300 gold bounty, has that Divine Sunder. So at any point that the Kanadu gets on top of Appleman, Appleman can't do anything. He's a victim at that point. So
when you're this far ahead, particularly with the Sunder as well for the the max HP game, not game, but the healing and the brawling and everything, and the anti-tank stats. If Meganar has used the stun and the ult, Viego actually outtrades you. He outtrades Meganar, which is a rare thing to see. It's like Gnar counters typically have been, you beat Mini Gnar, you can Yasuo wind wall the boomerang, suddenly that's a really long cooldown, you can't shave back, and then you just kind of run him down. That was kind of like the typical counter. Yeah. Viego just out stats you. That's how powerful this champion is right now. Even with the nerfs in 11.13 and the patch before as well, it's just been ridiculous to see how Viego can deal with these brawlier fighter archetypes in the top lane.
Well, there's something to be said about the capacity to heal your way through your problems, and I think Viego... Can
it heal me through a Burning Core Sengoku game?
That depends on what kind of therapist you have.
Yeah.
Ooh, Zenith might be in trouble here. Early Flash does dodge the Zenith Blade. Sorry, the Solar Flare. Takes a lot of damage, though. The Deadly Flourish should be enough to get the damage out, and yeah, just burns the death. Francis' secret. And now, Rift Herald even dropped Corporal. Can't do anything. Like, you're a Braum. You need backup.
Exactly. And okay, another slick cleanse from Zenit. Had one Captain Jack earlier, had another one there. It's funny how all these Jin Air names keep coming back to haunt us today, isn't it? But Zenit just disconnected from Corporal at that point. Corporal was off trying to look through. I'm not sure if they were reset or looking for vision there. I wasn't actually looking at the minimap at that point in time. Zenit just too far out of position though. Curtain Call comes down in the way that only Jin can follow up from that kind of distance, and that's a dead Varus.
Yeah, brilliant work there, and it's what you want to see, right? You pick the Jin not because you want a passive early game or you enjoyed Sesame Street's The Count, because you want to win the early game.
Sadly, if we did that last game, which I totally should have done now, it would have been just like 1 kill, and then a 13-minute break, 2 kills,
We can appreciate that there have been more kills in this game
than the entirety of the last one.
Than I think was in the previous one, so we can have that going for us here.
I'm starting. It's just like what? It's like when you say like, wow, nature's beginning to heal, and there's actually finally kills on the rift again. That's what we're here for. And I've sorely missed it myself. Of course, going back to kind of the state of the game, Hawks are in a really bad disadvantage. Sejuani has survived the early game, nay, thrived in the early game. So has every single lane at this point. You're waiting for a Muramana onto your Varus, you're waiting for something like Duskblade as well, but they are not going to be completed soon enough. Oh, that is such a sad Sonic Wave from Dasher, because if you'd hit that onto the back minion, that could have, well, it probably would have been a kill onto Sol. You flash in for the kick, doesn't matter if he flashes the other side, that's a lot of damage coming through.
Yeah, it could have been enough, but unfortunately not the way it pans out. As we see the team's posturing, the Dragon's up soon, so we see, I like this aggression from Dasher trying to find something. Recap though,
and he's really trying.
Rotates up.
And Dasher is so hard to try. He's trying so hard at this point. You know, we talked about it pre-game, very pivotal to the team, looked good in losing scenarios, even on the team's worst iterations too. And he's trying to make plays. Corporal's caught.
Yeah, Corporal caught out there, not even able to get the Glacial Fissure out as the rest of Hawks are available. Apperman is in Mega Gnar, but does not have access to the backline there as the Curtain Call forces the Hawks to flee from the fight. This is utter disaster now. Curtain Call didn't do a lot of damage, but Hawks can't realistically contest this now. No Mega Gnar available to them, no Equalizer, no Something Dragon's Rage. They have nothing.
Well, ironically, the one person who can tank the Curtain Call at the end of that fight is a Braum, and he died first. There's not even an option at that point. See what's happening with the Hawks. Turns out, Dasher is trying so hard. Again, Sol very nearly caught up, but the Gale Force carries them to safety. The Hawks are trying with their comp, but it's so hard.
Oh, dive into the backline. Recap's got a beautiful start off there. Goodbye, Zenit. As the Dragon does go down, the Hawks are scattered. They don't know where they are. They don't know what they're doing. All they know is that they must try and stop the Rascal Jesters from retreating. Sol is caught out. Recap fleeing with them. Kanadu is on the wrong side of the hill, but will he get out in one piece?
Oh, Viego resets!
As they're diving through, but instead, the Rascal Jesters turn things around. Hawks have overcommitted for the fight, and disaster on the bottom half. The Hawks overstay their welcome. They went hunting for way too long and get punished for it.
The end of that fight looked so Hawks favored until the flash stun comes in from Viego. There's a reset. There are 2 resets. The retreat has to be sounded. Hawks get away with getting the Dragon, but they're leaving with a 5,000 gold deficit, more kills being put onto the enemy's kill column as well. Once again, Dasher, throughout all of this replay and before too, is finding plays just inches away from being the play which catches someone important out. The rest of the team does not have that kind of agency, and they're getting caught out in their own right. They are pushing forward. They're looking for the plays. Zenit just can't walk forward, though, and it's all well and good having the Braum. We talked about this. It's great. You can block out a couple of those different bits of CC, maybe the Sejuani ultimate, but not the Yone. You don't get to block the flying body. Zenit hits the ground, and as soon as the AD carries down, that becomes an issue. But at least they managed to follow through with a pick of their own. That just doesn't last up until the first reset comes through. The resets change everything. They get 1, they get 2, and that turns the fight around in itself. Under the tower, just a little too far from the Hawks.
And that Recap got out of that was ridiculous. If you got to see that play, he basically had the knock-up start charge of his Q ready to go. So he went back in, used it to get away from Apperman's re-engage after the Viego stun. Fantastic setup there. And yeah, Zenit, it looks bad, but I wouldn't even accredit that to Zenit's fault per se, because Recap got a phenomenal engage on him.
No, exactly, you know, and that's the problem with Varus. You are bad against dive. That's why Nocturne was such a problem for this champion when he was in the ascendancy within the meta. You just can't defend yourself. You don't get a chance to free hit and fight, even as Poke, as the Legolas build. I guess we went through plenty of Lord of the Rings references earlier, but Zenit kind of struggling to live up to that kind of name in its own right. And Rascal Jesters now have 2 very strong solo laners with incredible amounts of kills, assists, and items, both with teleports, able to go into the side lanes, get pressure. Recap pushing all the way up to the inner, and is ready to respond at a hair trigger.
And Hawks haven't sent anyone to go deal with this. Finally, Dasher is on their way, but they're just a little bit slow. And the Hawks, a team that we have, I think, a bit critical of when it comes to how do they play the game. Well, they do well in laning phase, and then outside of laning phase, they kind of look lost and they fall apart. Well, we're seeing that here. They didn't even, they did decently in laning phase, and now they're here. They just look like they don't really know where to go from here. Like, how do they recover this game? They're asking themselves that question, and currently, I think their only answer is, hey, we have 2 dragons.
So, there is a, looking at the bright sides of the Hawks, though, the difference between this split and last, where, of course, the Hawks fell apart at the seams, is that Tussle is a factor. Tussle was not a factor in spring. In fact, they only really had their first good moments during the one playoff series that they had, where they sadly bowed out at that point too. They did have that 5-game series in the very first round against V3. But looking at Tussle now, most damage in the game at that point, I think even though the Rumble's out of meta, if it is comfort for this jungler who has struggled to find form for quite a while at this point, you can see how important it is to this team, because at least they're mounting some kind of defense and having something to come out of that jungle as opposed to previous iterations.
Yeah, like in previous games of watching the Hawks, and it's why I talked about Tussle's Volibear, right? Is I have been quite critical of Tussle's Volibear, of not liking the fact that he seems to just spend 20 minutes, 15 minutes just farming. Like, and I'd like to see this on the Rumble. Yes, it's not meta. Yes, it's not traditional. Soul is probably dead, but it works for him as Soul runs for the hills there. Dasher will be able to pick up that kill there, courtesy of the team. But now, Hachamacha wants to get revenge for the AD carry. You know what? Recap wants to get a bite of it too.
Does quick and slick response from Hachamacha and crew. It is a 1-for-1. It is at the cost of Dasher, of course, for the Hawks, and then Zena on the other side. But Dasher going down is a problem for the Hawks, because we've seen how many of these plays have just been look-ins from Dasher, trying to get something working. No one else has that kind of agency. Briefly mentioned that. At least you get a teleport on the side of the trade as well for the Hawks. Maybe they can break open a little bit of the side lane pressure, which has been so ever-present for Rascal Jesters after the early advantages come through. Now we're waiting, really, for the next dragon, which is coming up now. It is only that Cloud Rift. In this kind of game, none of these champions are going to be especially pleased with a Cloud Dragon. This isn't going to be a game-winning soul. I mean, it is conditionally a strong soul, just not in this case. Rascal Jester is going to take it for free, and the Hawks just say, yeah, have it. We would rather have an early Elder at this point. We don't want to contest this at this point. Just take the dragon.
And it's also, the last couple of fights for the Hawks haven't gone well. We've got a 4,000 gold deficit. Do you need to fight that one? No. You don't have to fight that one. It's not game critical. You weren't in position. Just, as you say, give up the dragon. There's no need to die for an objective that isn't critical.
Well, you take freebies. You take freebies, but you don't commit like that. I think we're seeing more and more how critical this Lee Sin is to everything. Because most of the time when you have a Varus in the Rumble, we talked about it right from the draft, the first 2 picks, saying, yeah, it's a good combo. Bit early in the draft to pick it, but it's a good combo if you can put people in place. Speaking of that, Rumble is walking close to death and doesn't flash away!
Oh no, we saw some jungles quick on the trigger fingers. Tussle is not one of them. And now, with Tussle dead, Baron is a very real possibility.
Rascal Jesters, as always, have a finger on the pulse, the rhythm, the win conditions of the game. They find their man, they find their pick, and what is the response? There is no equalizer, there's no Mega Gnar right now. They're just gonna take the Baron.
Yeah, they're going to commit to the Baron there, but the fight is coming through as the Hawks are not willing to give that up. But the Hawks have already been done, but the Hawks are done! They've already lost Zenit. Zenit didn't even get a chance to flash himself to safety as the Hawks are forced to flee. The Baron didn't make it out alive. Zenit didn't make it out alive either.
Another kill, a kill on the Baron as well. Rascal Jesters with 1 pick put this game onto the edge, looking over the precipice of the cliff. And the Hawks, well, they don't have an abseiling kit with them. They'll be plummeting sooner rather than later. The mid-outer turret is falling. It's falling very quickly. And as we said, with the 1-3-1 setup that Rascal Justice had and the lack of side lane playmaking that the Hawks have, I seriously worry for them with this Baron buff now. Rarely do you see the ability to 1-3-1 with a Baron buff in modern League of Legends. That kind of died out in Season 9 once teams like G2 showed you how you can punish that style of play, which is why it is so critical this pick comes in and it leads to the Baron for them. They have a period of ascendancy now where they get whatever they want on the map.
And Hawks here, I don't think they have a choice but to contest this, but the way they lose Zenit, look at this, Zenit gets pulled away from the side, he's got Kieran Hunter on top of him, he's like, crap, I'm in danger, and then just dived on by Recap. The second Recap
How close is he to dying there? How close.
Very. But like the second, I love this. The second Zenit walked anywhere near Recap looked at him and said, "No, you're dead," and then just straight up kills him. It's so rough to be Zenit in this situation because if your finger isn't on the flash key, what do you do?
Well, that's a very good point. At this point, buy a Zhonya's. Maybe that'll save you. Sadly, AP Varus not really much of a factor or a build in League of Legends anymore. But yeah, I mean, you look at what happened to Recap in that fight. Gets hit by the Varus ult. They have Braum CC coming in after that, and it's still not enough. It's still not enough at that point. The shield comes through. There's you know, a lot of levels on this character too. 2 levels up over Dash, who was so dominant in the early game. With those extra stats, with the shield bow too, just more than enough to keep them safe. Well, just about, and come away with the kill as well.
Yeah, and now with this lead, they are potentially looking for Apperman, or at least the tier 1, tier 2 turret on the top half of the map. And now with the Baron, Rascal Jesters are just going to slowly start taking the Hawks' base apart. And well, much like a poorly constructed nest, I don't think the Hawks are going to be able to keep it in one piece.
Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, I like that. No, and I mean, so at least right now they haven't given up an inhibitor turret. Of course, those are the hardest ones to take. One of the things which actually very much impressed me about, to kind of quickly pivoting and kind of talking about some of the other teams in the league and how they've done in this situation, we saw DFM very quickly and cleanly slice through the base. Slice through the base in their early game versus Burning Core, and they did that with stuff like the Thresh Lantern to kind of bring people closer to a tower, very quickly rotate in a way that Bard tends to do with his tunnels and stuff like that. That's one of my favorite factors within League of Legends, seeing these almost semi-global abilities let you kind of roam around the map. Having a 1-3-1 can help you secure that wave kind of flow from top to bottom or bottom to top to kind of achieve the same effect without having the same kind of semi-global transition between lane kind of abilities. But Rascal Jesters don't manage to take an inhibitor turret just yet. They'll have to have another hard swing of the sledgehammer to break open the base.
Yeah, but I think they've already put a few chips into it. Sure, the turrets may be plenty healthy, but everything beyond that, well, it's a little bit on fire right now. Specifically in the tune of about 11,000 gold difference between these two teams, which means Hawks are now not able to contest the dragon unless it's a you must contest this dragon at all costs like an Elder. And Baron, honestly, I don't think the Hawks can safely contest Baron because we saw what happened last time. Tussle just got nuked, and you cannot afford to have that happen to you twice.
Right now, at least they have... At least right now, they have themselves the vision all around the top side of the map. Sadly, that's not what the dragon is. They're going to have to get that up as well. Looks like they're buckling in for the longer haul, you know, because they realize they're not in a position to fight right now. I don't really know when they can fight at this point. That's the sad point. You do get outscaled heavily by this kind of point. You do have a Cyrilda's Grudge on Zenit. No Mythic just yet. Saw that there was a Hyper Tank on the other side, and of course the Viego 2, lots of armor builders. That at least you can try and get the earlier, more efficient damage against those tanks, but it means no Mythic. It means no stacking damage from something like an Eclipse or the Duskblade more likely as well. And the Hawks, I don't really know what they're looking for now. Maybe they are just saying, maybe Elder Steel, maybe that's it, because it's looking a bit doomed outside of that.
I think what's happening to the Hawks right now is they're caught in effectively a catch-22 like catch-22-esque situation where if you fight right now, you'll lose the fight. There is very little doubt that they don't know they're this far behind. So they're saying to us, okay, we can't take the fight unless we absolutely have to. We need to stall the game out and we need to farm. We need to try get more gold into our carries. We need to try get items. And then, as you said, they don't really outscale their opponents. So you have to find a window where you've hit your power spikes, and it's not to say that Rascal Jesters haven't hit theirs, but more so, you just have to worry about you for now. You have to get your items, and you just kind of have to forget that the Rascal Jesters scale better than you. You just have to get your items, pray that you live long enough to make it work, and then survive. It sounds really bad, and honestly it is. You're in a situation where if you survive, you get outscaled, and if you fight, you die. So
it's rough. It is seriously rough. It is seriously rough. And that's what I'm looking at this Hawks comp and where they're in the game. Like, look, it's 11,000 gold. Doesn't matter how well you scale at that point as your own personal team. I mean, everything, even the earliest of compositions, would have still taken winning fights against you at that point. Going to a pause very quickly. So we will quickly be sorting that, and you'll have to see our lovely faces or whatever
Welcome back.
adjective you'd like to throw at that.
So we will hopefully dive right back into it. But I think what is most heartbreaking from this game, at least for me, is it started so well for the Hawks. It started with a solo kill from Dasher, for God's sake. Like, it
Yeah,
could have been so good. And then, what was it, like 2 team fights, and everything just fell apart from them from there.
yeah. It was an overcommit bot lane into a much more egregious overcommit top lane as well, actually, from me. Which led to just a huge advantage for Rascal Jesters across the map, both ends of the map, and it was just very difficult to deal with after that point.
Yeah. Well, on the bright side, the pause is over. The joy of being able to do it this way is just the play button, and we will dive right back into the game, where we see Rascal Jesters starting up the Baron and the Hawks. I think this is the right call here. Take it slow. If it means they're on the Baron and you lose it, that's fine, because we know that Rascal Jesters have no issues setting up a bait.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you die there, you lose the game. If you don't die there, I mean, technically you're still in the game. I don't know if it's still an improvement. It kind of is, I guess. But what you're banking on, and this is something which has kind of been the criticism of, I know LS has talked about it, but like there are a couple of other personalities, and I share this opinion too. If you're not fighting for an objective because, you know, you think it would lose you the game if you lose it, you are assuming that you can take a better fight sometime in the future. I just don't see exactly where that is from the Hawks. Again, might have to be Elder, but giving up the Baron against such a heavy dive combo as well, particularly when you
my God!
Very dangerous.
Dasher tries to find it, but not able to make that one work, and Apperman is just caught up in the sweep that is Recap's dive. And the Rascal Jesters say, look, you can try buy all the time you want. We don't give a damn when you don't fail and engage like that.
The Hawks try to fight things on their own terms. Say, okay, we'll give up the Baron, but it is a vector to try and get you to fight within our own space, in our own vision, where we can see all of you on the board at the same time. They see them, it doesn't matter, they die.
And that is Rascal Jesters claiming the win, but I gotta say, Hawks, specifically Dasher, put up a hell of a fight.
It was a fight. It was. Until suddenly it wasn't. There was a point where, of course, those overcommits ended up just being the story of that game. Rascal Jesters, though, incredibly clean, incredibly coordinated. And for me, this now is, I mean, I'm looking at DFM, looking at Rascal Jesters and how lethal they've been at closing out games. And we have ourselves a very tight top of the table. I can see ourselves getting towards another titanic matchup in the later stages of playoffs.
And that's the kind of game that you want to see out of one of the top tier teams. In this case, Rascal Jester sitting at the throne, I suppose you could say, of the LJL in summer. Is a game where, yes, things did start a bit rocky, but they were able to recover it. And it's all good saying, oh, but they fell behind in the early game, and they shouldn't have been in that position to have to recover it. Maybe so, but they can recover a game state that is not ideal for them. And not a lot of teams can say that. It is so difficult to have a losing game state and say, we got this.
And there were a lot of questions, for me, there were a lot of questions asked about Rascal Jester. We talked about it in the podcast, previous casts, again, kind of throughout all of our media. And I was wondering, how bad was it that Rascal Jesters, when they lost by being out-team fought. Bluntly, they were outplayed. They were out-team fought by Axes, and the game that they lost versus CGA as well was late game. It was messy, and it was wonderful to watch. When we saw teams like our Victorious V3, our Victorious DFM, they lost because of their own arrogance, and they kind of played into a bad draft. If Rascal Jesters don't even need to do that to lose, if they can actually be outplayed, I think that actually this could be a very interesting end to the split, because I don't think this means that our top team right now is clear head and shoulders above the rest of the pack.
And that is I think that's brilliant, honestly.
But then they come with this game, and I'm like, well, whatever.
But I love games like this because, yes, on paper and in reality, Hawks weren't winning this game. Like, as much as you want to hope for it, and I'm a Hawks fan, so I'm allowed to say this, right? Hawks were never in a position where this game was going to be, we'll just run over them, right? You can get ahead, you can do well, and we did see that. And for me, this game isn't the sign of, Hawks are going to blitz their way through the playoffs. This is the game to tell me that Hawks have a hell of a fighting chance in the playoffs, because you look against this game now, they went up against, the king on the throne, and yes, they missed their shot, but they still drew some blood, and that in itself, I think, is an achievement for a lower tier team that as you said, new team coming into it has performed better than we expected.
It has. And at the end of the day, they would really like to get a win out of their next game, because if they don't, suddenly they are still bottom of that playoffs bracket. Of course, they're up against CGA next, as far as I am aware, and that is going to be of course, this is our last game together. This was our last game together, so we're going to throw over to Middlecott and Melvin, who will be covering that game amongst the other two games as well. Can't wait to see how they end up going across. And yes, it will be the Hawks versus CJ next, so we get to follow up on this little duet of Hawks games.
Yeah, and for me, that this game is the Hawks CGA one, I should specify, is one of, if not the most important games coming in for the Hawks.
Huge.
So, because as you said, this is what can get them out from the bottom of the playoffs run. So, we'll see if they're able to do it, or whether the Hawks will find their wings clipped in the next game, where the Hawks go up against CGA. Guys, don't go anywhere, because the LJL OU has got plenty to come.
Maybe they can make a montage out of those clips.